It is Thursday, July 31st, and moments ago, President Trump dropping a hammer on Big Pharma. Letters going out to every Big Pharma company on the planet today, giving them all 60 days to agree to MFN status, most favored nation status for the U.S. This is a big deal. This will change the game for pricing, the amount Americans pay for prescription drugs. The deadline has now been set. We're going to show you also more proof Trump's tariff policy is working. Domestic auto production, one of the most critical sectors to reshore, exploding last month, jumping through the roof. Numbers don't lie. And wait till you see corporate media's reaction to these numbers. They're really pathetic attempts to try and spin this as a bad thing. How could you possibly say higher domestic auto production is a bad thing? It just doesn't make sense. We'll show you what they're trying to say.
Signed, President Donald J. Trump. Again, to the CEO of Eli Lilly. This letter, in its form, has been designed for each of the 17 major drug and pharmaceutical companies in the United States, and we're happy to provide you the full list. And I believe you will see all 17 letters popping on Truth Social very shortly, so you can look out for those, and I'm happy to take any further.
So for years, for almost 60 years, Americans have been paying significantly higher prices for drugs. We all know this, pharmaceuticals, than every single other high-income country on the planet, often 250, 300% more on average for prescription medications overall, and especially for brand name drugs. Every U.S. peer country, developed nation, would never, their governments would never allow that to fly. Do you think Europe or France would allow that, where they're paying 3 times more than the U.S., or whatever the number is? But somehow for decades, our politicians not only allowed it, they profited off it, sitting on boards, receiving political donations, favors probably, who knows what else to look the other way. This is the case with almost every prescription drug. The most common example that we always hear about is insulin. In the US, we're charged $6.25 per unit, whereas in Canada, Australia, and the UK, they pay $1.98. We pay $6.25. They pay $1.98. Why? A cancer drug called Imbruvica. We, U.S. consumers, would pay $333 per unit. Canada, Australia, and the UK paying around $100, over 3 times more. Why? And the list goes on and on. It's hundreds of pages long. Every prescription drug costing Americans 2.5 to 3 times more than every other country. Hence, why healthcare in this country is so damn expensive. Well, President Trump has said enough. Back in May, he signed an EO to deliver most favored nation status, most favored nation prescription drug pricing to America. Watch this, and then we'll show you what just happened today. Roll the tape.
Starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries and will no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging. For the first time in many years, we'll slash the cost of prescription drugs, and we will bring fairness to America. Drug prices will come down. We're going to cut out the middlemen and facilitate the direct sale of drugs at the most favored nation price directly to the American citizen.
I'm just so grateful to be here today. I never thought that this would happen in my lifetime.
This is the most powerful executive order on pharmacy pricing and healthcare ever in the history of our nation. By getting our allies to pay a bit more, we'll course correct a problem that's gotten out of hand.
We're standing up for the American consumer who's been paying far too high prices for far too long.
We didn't take an oath to heal patients and then watch their life get ruined financially. We're going to do everything we can at the FDA to support this executive order. It's transformative. Thank you, Mr. President.
What that means, most favored nation status, is all these big pharma companies, these prescription drug manufacturers, would no longer be able to charge Americans more than the lowest price they charge any other developed nation. So if France pays $1.98, they can't charge us $6. They can charge us no more than $1.98. Well, since Trump passed that or signed that EO 2 months ago, there has been major pushback on that. The argument from Big Pharma and from their stooges in Congress, which there are many, is that Americans being overcharged is what makes it possible for R&D to do the research to create these new drugs. What a stupid argument. And Trump's not having that. This morning, sending letters to the CEOs of each of the largest pharma companies on the planet, letting them know they have 60 days to comply with the most favored nation pricing. And if you fail to comply, the U.S. will deploy every tool in our arsenal to make sure you do. Look at this. Letters going out this morning to Pfizer, Novartis, Bristol Myers Squibb, Gilead Sciences, EMD, Novo Nordisk, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, and a dozen others, all saying the same thing. Make no mistake, a collaborative effort towards achieving global pricing parity would be the most effective path, but if you refuse to step up, we will deploy every tool in our arsenal to protect American families from continued abusive drug pricing. Signed personally, Donald J. Trump. No auto pen on that signature. In another story, more pressure bearing down on Congress to pass legislation barring members of Congress from trading individual stocks. We covered yesterday the president calling out Nancy Pelosi as getting filthy, stinking rich off inside information. That's what he said. Well, this morning, his press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, doubling down, this time giving details on just how ridiculous Pelosi's gains have been. Watch.
The reason that this idea to put a ban on stock trading for members of Congress is even a thing is because of Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she is rightfully criticized because she makes, I think, $174,000 a year, yet she has a net worth of approximately $413 million. In 2024, Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio, this was a fascinating statistic to me, grew 70% in 1 year in 2024, and her portfolio outperformed every single large hedge fund in that same year, and even more than doubled the returns of Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. So I think the president stands with the American people on this. He doesn't want to see people like Nancy Pelosi enriching themselves off of public service and ripping off their constituents in the process. As for the mechanics of the legislation and how it will move forward, the White House continues to be in discussions with our friends on Capitol Hill.
And you wonder why something like prescription drug prices have stayed so high for so long in this country. It's politicians who purposely sell their soul for $1. Well, Senator Josh Hawley putting forward legislation to end this practice permanently. The bill, originally called the Pelosi Act, has since been renamed to make it sound more bipartisan. It's now called the Honest Act, and it really is the furthest a congressional stock trading ban has progressed in a long time. But there's still problems, unfortunately. Mainly, the bill currently banning Congress, their spouses, and dependents from trading stocks immediately. That's good. It also requires all Congress people to divest after 180 days of Trump signing it into law. So far, so good. Here's where it gets sticky. The bill would also require they divest from blind trusts, and it says blind trusts can no longer be used to invest in equities for Congress. And lastly, the bill, if passed, would require every congressman to divest all private company holdings of more than 1,200 employees. Those last 2 points raising a ton of opposition inside the Republican Party. Watch.
Some others come into it and say, hey, I have stock holdings. I'm not one of those, by the way. They would come in and say, I'm going to put all this in a qualified blind trust. They're prohibited from having communication with them. That person is actually managing it, and they're separated totally. This bill would say, no, you can't do that anymore. So if you have stocks, you can't put that in a qualified blind trust any longer. Why would that be?
A couple of things. Number one, if you have a qualified blind trust and you are a member of Congress, again, you have until the beginning of your next term, should the voters see fit to reelect you.
No, I get that, but then after that, it's prohibited on it. So
correct. So for those who know ahead of time that they're going to be joining this body, they can no longer use qualified blind trusts. And the reason for that is, as you know, the rules on qualified blind trusts are not airtight. They're actually very loose. It is very difficult to police. You don't police them, and the Ethics Committee.
Well, the Ethics Committee, thank you for mentioning that. Ethics Committee does police that. So thanks for telling me what I don't do. We do police that, but
you do not police the structure of the blind trust.
We do, actually. Every single blind trust that's actually put in has to be approved.
And they have to, and so before, and you police then the buying and the selling and the communication back and forth between members?
We do police the communication between the members and the individuals of the blind trust. That's correct.
And so you think that that's an effective way. You're saying you think we need no changes now. You think that effectively accounts for any sort of
Again, this suddenly sounds like it's personal. You're telling me what I don't do.
No, I'm just asking you a question because what we found over and over is when members of Congress have been investigated for securities violations, they have said over and over, oh, I had a trust. I didn't really know anything about it. And then as it turns out, they're communicating with their trustee, and they say, oh, we're allowed to do that. No. So you're telling me maybe they violated multiple laws. No, here's what I would say. I think that at the end of the day, if you're asking me why do we need to eliminate blind trusts, it's because blind trusts, I think, are often workarounds because they can be structured in multiple different ways, right? There's not one way to structure blind trust, correct? Or there's only one way?
There is a way that you have to structure it if you're in the Senate and going through ethics. Have you gone through that process before?
No, because I don't have any of these securities, James, because when I got elected, I sold all of my trusts and assets.
Great.
I don't have a blind trust. I practice what I preach. I don't have individual stocks. I don't trade in stocks. I'm not a billionaire, unlike others on this committee. And what I think is the American people are sending us a clear message, and I hope that they are watching this today. They're sending us a message that they want us to behave as they behave.
Right. So I'm just trying to ask some questions. I'm trying to figure out some things on this because of the way that it's shaped. I've got to be able to work through this. I do believe the qualified blind trust works. The folks that you're mentioning, I think, are folks that say, hey, I had a stockbroker, I had somebody that was handling that, but that was not a qualified blind trust. That's a very different structure to be able to have that. There's prohibited communication there. Many of the accusations that have come in the past several years have been somebody else was handling it, but it wasn't a qualified blind trust. So I was confused on why this particular one, because there haven't been accusations on that. That's somebody that comes in with some wealth, which I don't have, which you don't have. Someone with some wealth that comes in and says, hey, this family inheritance, whatever they may have, worked their whole life, got it. They can put in a blind trust over there. This also requires several things here. It requires you sell it rather than just prohibit trades. Several times I've heard you mention, hey, they shouldn't be trading in it. What about individuals that had stocks when they came? Why should they sell it to be able to be here? Why not just have a flat-out prohibition to say you can no longer buy, no longer sell? If you have it, stock market goes up and down, you can't touch it. You have to just leave it there. Why not? What was the decision to be able to say you got to sell it all rather than just you can't trade anymore?
Well, there is a ban on trading that would take effect immediately for all members, not just new members who are coming in, but for all members. So I've been saying over and over that you have until your next term, should you be reelected, in order to divest. But you make the important point that the trading would be prohibited immediately.
Right.
Your question is why even in the next term require people to divest? I think that the answer to that is because you know what you own, presumably. I mean, you know that you have assets in the following securities. That constitutes a financial interest, a pecuniary interest. And it presents a conflict of interest to be getting briefings, voting on legislation, doing these things where you know you could be increasing or decreasing the value of your portfolio.
We also have farmers that are here in Congress that they vote on farm policy, and they also have ag provisions as well. And so that you can't eliminate all provisions that are out there on that. So I'm just trying to be able to figure out, this also has a reporting requirement. If someone has an FHA loan, it has to come back to ethics, or a VA loan, it has to come back to ethics. If they're involved in any of the farm programs, it has to come back to ethics, and we've got to be able to track it.
Let me know what you think about this. Does this go too far? Should members of Congress be able to maintain ownership stakes in their own private companies that they built possibly before running for office? I do see the problem with some of that. You want successful people joining Congress, not just AOCs. Let me know what you think, though. In another story, brand new econ numbers released on domestic manufacturing, one of the largest tariff-focused industries, the auto industry, seeing domestic auto production surging by a whopping 36% last month, while imports falling by 30%. Let's read that one more time. Domestic auto production, American auto production, cars made in the USA, surged by a stunning 36%, while foreign autos imports dropped by 30%. This is exactly what the Trump administration has promised would happen with their tariff policy, reshoring domestic manufacturing, bringing manufacturing back to the United States, and it appears to be happening. Here was the president addressing this today. Watch.
Well, we have
reduced the federal workforce by 70,000 jobs. So these are private jobs that are coming back to our country. Federal jobs are being cut. Critics said that our tariffs would hurt the economy, but the data shows the exact opposite, and the exact opposite is happening. The U.S. Treasury has taken in $150 billion from tariffs, and we'll be adding about $200 billion next month for totals that nobody's ever seen before, frankly. And foreign imports were down 30% in the second quarter, while the domestic auto production surged by a stunning 36%. How about that number, Dr. Oz, right? That's good. That's good. We want to do that with your patients, too. We'll have a very healthy, we're going to have a very healthy country. At the same time, inflation continues to fall faster than expectations. And
meanwhile, over on CNN, the hosts trying to find anything and everything to complain about with Trump's tariff policy and these trade deals that he's striking. Watch how they criticize the trade deals that he's closing. But when pressed, this is the good part, when pressed, what exactly would you prefer these deals look like? Because they complain about everything with these deals. Every time a deal's closed, they have a problem with it, but they never give specifics. They just criticize it. They don't say, here's what would have been better. Watch how they finally address this question. Watch.
And Abby, the deals. Let's talk about the deals. Right. So we've got the deal with the European Union, which somebody has already described as pie in the sky. They simply will not buy that amount of energy, and nor will they invest that amount of money. We have the deal with Japan, where nobody knows where the $650 billion worth of investment is going to come from. Nobody. The Japanese admit they don't know where it's going to come from. We've got the deal announced today with the South Koreans. What Donald Trump has brilliantly done, he wanted a headline number, and it's around 15%, but the underlying terms of trade deals are garbage.
So Richard, what deal would you have preferred?
How do you mean?
Well, what details of a deal would suffice for you?
Well, I would have liked them to have negotiated a proper long-term
What's proper?
deal.
Let's focus on the word proper.
Where the
What's
detail
proper
holds
to
up.
you?
Where the detail...
No, because you keep saying this, but you're giving no specificity whatsoever.
Well,
I can sit here and name a whole bunch of random ridiculousness. That means absolutely nothing at all.
With respect, no, because they've actually announced a European deal where supposedly $600
So
billion...
give specifics about what you would like to see in an alternative. Wait a minute, Scott. Give an alternative and give specifics for what would be a deal that would satisfy your critique.
A long-term trade relationship deal that doesn't rely on a fictitious amount of investment.
Okay.
The Japan deal.
Richard.
No.
I'm listening.
The Japan deal envisages $650 billion worth of investment. But nobody says by whom or how or the penalty against. It is literally making it up.
Because
let me let some of the other folks.
That's such a good point that Shermichael makes. When you hear people criticize these trade deals, which I just don't get. I don't see how you can look at the EU trade deal, for example, and say that's a bad deal. It's just untrue. They would be better off just saying, giving the president some credit, giving the administration some credit. You did a good job with the EU. Saying it's bad just doesn't make any sense. There's nothing about the deal that isn't a win for America. But Dems in the media, they just can't help but push that it's a bad deal. Okay, then tell us why. Or not even why. Tell us what would make it a good deal. Because I haven't heard one suggestion on how to make it better. It's already such a one-sided deal. Any further, I don't think the EU would be able to sign off on it. They wouldn't be able to survive any more of a one-sided deal. It would hurt them too much. I mean, right now, it's better than the original 25% tariff rate for them, but 15% is still a lot. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.